Okay, so this is Pam Sledd. I'm with Jesus Junk Journals, and this is my series of videos for beginners. And so I talked to you on my first one about cutting your pieces out, but let me back up because I want to make sure you understand. So you can go out and get these digital downloads, and you'll get an email. There'll be a link, you click it. It will connect to your printer, and you can print these pages out. So then you'll want to cut them out. And I've got this is a Dahl cutter, D-A-H-L-E, and they have different brands you can get. It's a rotary cutter. It's supposed to be self-sharpening. After I bought it and read the fine print, it says you will have to replace the cutting, the little round cutter every once in a while, but I guess it's supposed to last longer than the kind where you change the blade all the time. So I went ahead and I cut the pieces out of the add-on kit. It's called the add-on kit for the Heaven Journal on my website. So if you go look at all that, there's about four at least different kits for the Heaven Journal. So I've got the basic or the main kit, and in that you get, I think, 18 pages, 15, I forget. But they're the flat pages that you'll cut out. You just cut the borders off. And like I mentioned in the last one, you'll just fold them in half and you'll make pages out of those. And we'll explain what you do with those and how you bind them into a journal and all that down the road. But for now, so you cut those out. The add-on kit has all the little pieces and parts, and that's what I have here. I went ahead and cut it out as much as I could with this rotary cutter. So you don't have to have a rotary cutter. I was also going to mention that, and if this is your first journal, don't worry about it. But if you keep making journals and you, as I mentioned, you want to give them as gifts and you want to do 4 or 5 of them of the same journal, I suggest that you print them all out at one time and cut them out all one time and do each kind of stage of them at one time. It will save you a lot of effort and time, and it's quite a job. So maybe you only want to do 2 at a time to see how that goes. But I would do that rather than making one complete and then starting all over from scratch, because that is really daunting. So, but if this is your first journal and you're just starting out, you don't need to worry about that. So I'm not sure that in fact, I know this isn't in frame. Let me turn this so you can see a little bit more of it. So the way these work is you just slide your papers up, you keep them up against the straight edge, and then there's a plastic bar here. You put the paper underneath it, and you just get, the part you're gonna cut is just on the other side of this plastic bar. So you line that up, and then this is your cutter, and you just slide it across, and you can cut both ways, back and forth. And let me see if I can line this up. Sorry, my head's in the way. So you'll do that. Now, if you'll notice, because I wasn't directly over it, I cut just a little bit of it off. Don't worry about that. That's why they're junk journals. You can fix them. And if you cut them and you have maybe a white edge showing, that will happen a lot. Don't worry about it. I mentioned the distress ink. Let me pull that out. So this is, and it's messy, it's distress ink. This is Vintage Photo. That's the color of it, and it's by Ranger Inks. You can get it at Hobby Lobby. You can get it online on pretty much anywhere. This is kind of the one you use on everything. They come in 2 sizes. This is the big one. They have a small one. But for Vintage Photo, I would suggest that you go ahead and buy the large one. When you get these distress inks, you want to store them upside down whenever you can, because the ink tends to run to the bottom. And Tim Holtz is a name you'll probably hear a lot if you make junk journals. He, I don't think he owns the company, but he's a representative of Ranger, and he's on all the videos that show how to use things. And he's a designer that does a lot of products. And so his name appears on a lot of these products. And this is so Tim Holtz Distress Ink. Color is Vintage Photo. And they have daubers that you can use. You can buy special ones, and they're great. But I'm using a makeup application. Sorry, my husband's downstairs yelling while he's talking on the phone. He talks really loud. So you take your makeup applicator and use it, and you just kind of dab it on there. And so, for instance, on this edge, you just kind of go like that. And you do it after you've got them all cut out. But I just wanted to show you, like, here's a card. I cut these cards out. Notice there's a white edge there. And I could go back and I could cut that off, and normally I probably would, but I just want to show you as a demonstration that you can take this Distress ink and you kind of get it on the edges, and it makes it look old. I don't worry about getting it perfect, so if it makes little dots and things, that's fine. It just adds to the look of the distress and age of it. And so you do that to pretty much every piece of paper that goes in your journal. So I'll do another one. So this one, notice I cut it off kind of short. So again, you just use your Distress ink, and it never has to be a problem. Nobody ever notices. They have colors of Distress ink, and you can, I have a lot of different colors, but I have those in the smaller containers. So I'm jumping ahead, but this is the Distress ink that I mentioned and what you do with it. And that's kind of a mainstay, I would say, of the junk journals. So I'll set that aside for now. And so again, the rotary cutter, you don't have to have this. If you're just starting out, use a pair of scissors, cut it out. If you're making multiple journals, you probably do want to get a rotary cutter. So here are all the pieces and parts that I could do with the rotary cutter. So now I'm going to go in by hand and finish cutting out the other pieces. And so I'm going to leave you, but I just wanted to stop here and make sure you understood where we were and what to do. And so if you're doing this along with me, that's what you'll be doing, is you're getting ready to get all your pieces and parts all cut out. And then we'll go on to the next step. Okay, I'm back. I wanted to come back and talk about some of these pieces and parts. So as you go through these, there's 21 pages, and it would be really easy to kind of lose your place. So you might want to, as you go, start to assemble some of them. So I cut these out, and these are the back sides of them if you want to do it that way. You can use them separately. I'm going to glue them together. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that now just to make it less confusing. Now I'm going to use this art glitter glue. This is something I got on Amazon. It's really expensive. It's like $20. I know. That's expensive for glue if you're not used to it. But it dries super fast, and it comes with this metal tip and this pin. And it gives you a really tiny bead of glue, which is really nice on a lot of things, but it dries super fast. And so it's really nice. So if you can afford it, it's nice to have. You don't have to have it. You can use Elmer's glue. You can use whatever you want. But this is a nicer glue as far, it doesn't pucker things. So I'm just gonna go ahead and glue these together, and I will speed this up so you don't have to sit here and watch me glue all these, like, what is it? Watching paint dry, only this is watching glue dry. But, so I'm just gonna kind of smear it around a little bit, or not. That's the other thing about this glue, boy. It grabs a hold pretty quickly. And if you do get this glue, you want to be sure you put that pin in it. That pin is a stainless steel pin, according to the instructions when I got it. And you want to be sure you put that back in when you're done. Now, notice it's never going to line up perfectly. So you can either trim off any white edges you have, or you can just rely on that distress ink that I mentioned and go over all your edges. I'm going to go over it later and make it darker, but it will hide any kind of imperfections and trimming. I'm probably going to trim this one off just because it's bothering me. And as I said, this is a simple craft thing to do, making junk journals, because remember in grade school we used to cut things out. That's what this reminds me of. So those teachers were preparing you to make junk journals, they just didn't know it. So I'm going to go ahead and glue these, and then I'll fast forward, and then I'll come back and talk to you some more. Okay. All right, so there are those 5 tags. And so now you can lay these aside. There are other things we'll be doing to these later, but we're gonna go step by step. So let's put these over in the pile of sort of finished things. And these, I wanted to show you too, these are tabs. And so the way they work, let me show you. You'll cut, there's a line in the middle, and you'll cut it. And of course you'll cut this out, and it just makes little tabs, like a notebook if you had one in school that had tabs, and you can write whatever you'd like on the tab. There are a lot of them. Some people who make junk journals put tabs on every single page. They make them out of fabric, or they make them out of cardboard like these. So you can use as many as you want to use, or you can add other kinds if you want to mix them. It does make it easier to grab the page and turn it when you're going through a junk journal. So there's one tab, and so you're going to want to fold it on this line, and there's a lot of folding when you do junk journals. And so what I do is I take a ruler whenever there's a fold line, and I lay it right next to the line. I take an X-Acto knife. This is an X-Acto knife, and you get blades for it. Super sharp, and so be really careful with them. And you always want to cut away from your fingers. Keep your fingers away. Now, I'm not going to cut this, so be sure you use the back of the blade. I'm going to use this side of it and just drag it across there, and that scores it. Makes a little crease so that when you fold it, it just goes in exactly where you want it to go. And, or thereabouts. See, that's not perfect either, so I'm gonna kind of finesse it here a little bit, finagle it, and so then you'll, don't glue it right now, but when you glue it on your page, you'll put glue here and here, and then put the page here, and then glue it to the page and glue it to itself. But we're gonna do some more things to these tabs. So just for now, just cut them out, lay them aside. I would say go ahead and cut them out. They're gonna be a big pile of tabs, so you might wanna keep those in a separate little, maybe Ziploc bag or some way, so they're not in your way making a mess. And so I'm gonna go ahead and finish cutting out some more of these pieces and parts. There's another sheet of cards that look like this, and there are 4 of these, and then there's 4 that look like this, and then there's a corresponding page with scriptures that go with them. I will say this, they're different sizes, so you want to be sure you put the right size card with the right size picture. And I was like, what's going on? These aren't lining up. That's why. So they have their own matching card that fits them. And I'm going to go ahead and glue these together too, so those will be out of the way. Okay, so here is one of the things that happens when you do these cards. I've got 2 of these and I can't find the words that go with them. I'm sure they're buried amongst this stuff, but that's another reason why you want to kind of glue them as you go so you don't get too confused. So here's one more I found that matches up. So I'll go ahead and glue it. And then I'll just leave those 2 for later. I may have to print out again if I can't find them, but that's okay. Just print out another one if you have to. And as you do junk journaling, you keep containers, or I do, of scrap paper because you can always reuse them. Don't throw anything away. I'll show you here in just a second. Here is a bucket of all my scraps of things I've used. And whenever you need something, you just dig through your scraps and find it. And you'll use all these up. So keep a bucket of those. I also keep a bucket of pages and papers that I use because you can use scrapbook paper, but you know, if you only use a little corner of it, you just keep saving it. So you're going to need a bucket with that. And now here is the gesso that I mentioned earlier. I went ahead and took on this piece of scrapbook paper, I went ahead and put the gesso on it, and then I took a credit card and scraped it across for texture. You can use credit cards, you can use wax paper and blob it on, and I'll show you that down the road. But anyway, that's what that white is on there, just to add a little bit more interest, a little bit more texture to it. Let's see, here's paper that I've tea stained. Tea staining is another big thing that everybody does when they do junk journals. And you take tea, go down and make yourself a cup of tea with 5 tea bags. So it's super strong. You can also use coffee, make it super strong. And then you take that tea and you use paintbrushes or however you want to do it, spread out paper. I used, I had some scrapbooking paper, but you can buy all different kinds of paper, drawing journals and cardstock. Cardstock, like if you go to Walmart, you can get a ream of cardstock. And this isn't a ream, but you get a ream of cardstock, and then you lay out, like, let's say you lay out 6 or 8 pages of this, and then you take your tea and your paintbrush and you just go all over it and let it dry. And that ages it. It's kind of the whole vintage, wanting it to look vintage. But you can see where I had it on this. This was a yellow paper, but I've put tea on it. And so tea staining, you can spend an afternoon doing that. And it's, again, that mindless, it's just fun to just, I don't know why it is, but it is. And until you try it, you might not believe me, but it's really fun. There's some more of the gesso. I use a lot of brown paper. I like brown paper. So I had paint that I use this as my backdrop when I was painting things. I kept it, cut it up, and I use it for pages and journals. And you might be wondering, like, well, I thought you said that you print out your pages. I do print out my pages, but what I like to do, there's some tea stained paper. What I like to do is alternate my printed pages with one page of handmade paper. So for your first journal, I suggest you just use a kit, get your 12 pages, fold them in half, put 4 pages in a signature. There's a word you're gonna understand a little bit better down the road. Signatures. A signature, let's see if I have one here. Here's a journal that I'm working on, and they're just the loose pages. And I actually have several signatures here, but they're not sewn together yet. So I just keep working on them and adding things to them. I did this with cloth. So what you'll see is this is a printed page. I folded it up. I actually used distress ink. It looks like tea staining, but I used the distress ink that I mentioned to you earlier. So I folded it up and like this and this to get creases, and then went back and used the Distress ink on it so that it goes into the cracks. And then I put a piece of brown paper in. And now this has already got the circle that you'll see in a kit sewn onto it. Don't worry about that. But I had printed page, a regular plain junk journal type paper page. This is another printed page from my other kit. And I stamped on it. And we'll talk about stamping down the road. I sewed a pocket on it from the kit. So, printed page, junk page, printed page. Actually, this is a piece of my real eco printing that I talked about. So that's an extra page that's real. This is a printed page that this was the printed side. I used stamping on the other side. So every other page is a printed page. Here's a page that I used some spray Distress inks on, and it goes through to both sides, and I sewed a pocket from the kit on it. So that's there. This is a printed page with those pockets that I mentioned that go, the 3 pockets that layer over each other. So that was a printed page. I glued those on, and on the back I stamped with stencils. And I have a stamp pad that looks like handwriting that I stamped on it. This one is another printed page from my Thought Life series. And then on the back, I used a stencil with ink and sewed a pocket on it. This is just a piece. I had a blue bag, and so I cut it in half, cut these circles in it so it looks like you can get to it to put things in it. I glued it along the bottom so they're actually pockets. I took a pocket from a kit, glued it over here, and that will be in my journal. So when you get those pages all folded up in half, you're going to combine them and fold them like this. And you're going to put, now for your little, if you do the little starter one like I mentioned with the 12 pages, each signature, you'll have 3 signatures. Each signature will have 4 pages. You fold them up, and then you will bind them with some thread, and it's not as hard as it sounds, but we will get to that a little bit later. But when you sew them together, and that's a signature, and you'll have 3 of those. And then we'll show you how to bind them into a junk journal. It's super easy. No, don't worry about it. And you will glue them all into a spine, and you'll glue the spine to the cover, and before you know it, you'll have a journal. So we'll get to that. So first steps first, go ahead and finish your cutting out and assemble as you go if you can. Oh wait, here they are. There they are. Okay. There's those 2 cards I couldn't find. And finish cutting out the pieces and parts, and we will come back and talk about what the next step is.